Welcome back to another How to Mortar 101 virtual class series. I'm Staff Sergeant Heggert, and today's class will be over survivability techniques referring to Tactical Employment of Mortars, Chapter 5. Purpose. Mortar units are vulnerable to enemy attack as they fight alongside their supported units. Because of mortar unit lethality, they are often targeted by enemy with direct, indirect, and ground assault. Mortar units must be able to defend themselves while continuing to provide fires. So throughout this class, we're going to be going over the threats that mortar units face, techniques to reduce our vulnerability to enemy attack, and discussing mortar firing positions and other techniques to increase our survivability. The mortar leader considers a number of threats. The greatest danger to mortars are ground attack, air attack, and our biggest threat being enemy counterfire. Going into ground attack, when mortars support offensive operations, the greatest ground threat is chance contact with enemy forces that have been bypassed, purposely left behind, or from irregular forces. 3 examples of irregular forces are partisans, guerrillas, and insurgents. When mortars support defensive operations, the greatest threats are enemy reconnaissance and main forces. Enemy reconnaissance teams may encounter mortars by chance contact or be given the mission to locate U.S. mortar positions. Rehearsing and understanding our react to contact battle drill is how we can defeat enemy direct fire. Going into air attack now. Enemy aircraft pose a threat to mortars due to the difficulty in concealing mortar firing positions from aerial observation. Armed helicopters pose a major threat because of their standoff acquisition ability. Many armies around the world now have unmanned aircraft systems specifically used to reconnaissance and attack. Utilizing a javelin system is how we can best defeat enemy air attack. And getting into enemy counterfire. Faced with a counterfire threat, a mortar leader must understand friendly mortars may be the first priority for enemy artillery, mortar, rocket, and direct fires. Skilled enemy observers can accurately locate friendly mortar positions using laser rangefinders or simple map reading. Enemy counter mortar radars are accurate with small location air. Enemy radio interception and direction finding can locate radio transmitters rapidly and accurately. Understanding our ComSec on the radios, maintaining minimal signature in the MFP, and vigilant outer security increases our survivability. Because of the size, range, and high angle fire, enemy mortars are likely indirect fire weapons used against U.S. mortars. So what that's saying is our biggest threat is basically our biggest asset. We as mortars, our biggest threat is enemy mortars. Mortar units are specifically targeted. As part of the battalion, they may receive heavy counterfire. Some enemy attacks have delivered up to 450 rounds on a company position as part of a 30-minute preparatory fire. Kind of want you to think long and hard about this and just the amount of rounds that is within 30 minutes on a company size. It's absolutely insane, and that's our biggest part of enemy counterfire and going into today's class on survivability and why it is emphasized in the MFP. In addition to HE fragmentation rounds, some enemy weapons fire rounds that include incendiary rounds, enhanced blast warheads, and subprojector warheads. Counterfire protection. Choosing tactically sound mortar positions and defilade and using concealed reverse slope positions are effective techniques against enemy counterfire. Defilade is protection from hostile observation and fire provided by an obstacle such as a hill, ridge, or bank. It is important to mortars because of the difference in trajectories of field guns, howitzers, rocket launchers, and mortars. So looking at the illustration, you can see the hill and you have your different examples of mortar, field gun, howitzer, and rocket launcher. So what this is basically saying is using our high angle fires from mortars and how we can shoot into dead space and how we can use defilade such as a hill or ridge to create basically a barrier for us from field guns, howitzers, rocket launchers, since they're low angle fire. Def-lead protects mortar positions from field gun and low angle howitzer fires, but not from enemy mortar fires and artillery high angle fires. Mortar leaders must not think that def-lead provides an absolute protection because of the enemy has their own methods to seek and destroy friendly fire assets, even when they are in good def-lead positions. So what this is basically saying is being able to use def-lead for us to shoot, the enemy can also do the same. Once again, going into what I said previously about our biggest threat is enemy mortars, because they can shoot into that dead space and be able to basically put effects on us even though we're behind a hill or a ridge. Going into this as well for like urban operations, if it's flat terrain, we can use buildings as that hill or ridge, and with the low angle fire of artillery and howitzers, basically using the buildings as that hill or ridge. Biggest thing being the building and what it's made of material, such as if it's made of glass, that's just going to create additional fragmentation. And these are all things that are going through basically the platoon leader's head as he emplaces and looks for our MFP when we're doing the occupations. Going into survivability techniques, now that we kind of know our threats, these techniques are basically how to enhance our survivability while we're out in our MFP. So we've gone over shoot and hide positions. So their effective technique when covering concealed firing positions are unavailable or an enemy counterfire is anticipated. An example of this, there's only one place mortars can shoot from on a roadway. A hide position adjacent to the road and under some trees is optimal. The crew should occupy the position until receipt of the fire mission. Base plates can be left in the shoot position or stakes can be used to mark positions. Aiming post and the aiming circle may be left set up. And then units with an MFCS can particularly be effective using this technique just based on the speed and then the GPS basically getting rid of the aiming circle and the poles. And then going into camouflage. Camouflaging a position is accomplished through all phases of any operation we're doing. So literally from the individual all the way through the trucks and the MFP. It's critical to prevent the identification of mortar positions by the enemy, especially those that are unmanned aerial systems in conjunction with ground reconnaissance. Going into frequent displacement. Frequent displacement enhances survivability from enemy counterfire, but can also degrade the ability of mortars to provide immediate massed fires. Timing and number of moves are critical to survival and are based on the maneuver commander's guidance, the tactical situation, and enemy target acquisition and counterfire threat. A little bit on frequent displacement. It's easier to explain once we get back into a classroom setting where we can go through the whiteboard and what this actually means. So frequent displacement is literally in the definition. So whether that's by squad or by section, being able to displace, shoot, and then continue to displace and shoot. Biggest thing with this is obviously it'd be very taxing on our soldiers, especially if we were to be unmounted. And then offset registration reduces the vulnerability of the primary position when one mortar fires the adjustment round from offset location. So once again, being able to illustrate this through whiteboard in a classroom setting, which we'll go over to here in the next coming weeks, will make more sense. But what it's saying, so offset registration is in a normal call for fire, 2 guns the adjusting gun. So they shoot the adjusting rounds, mortars 1, 3, and 4 follow on their data. So offset registration is basically taking 2 gun, being able to move them. They get a call for fire. They can shoot while the platoon is in a different position following on data. As soon as they get the call for fire, or their fire for effect, 2-gun would then displace, and then the mortar platoon would shoot the fire for effect and then displace. So, layman's terms, 2-gun would be adjusting. They'll be away from the platoon. They shoot the adjustment rounds once the call for fire, or once the fire for effect comes into place. They displace, and the mortar platoon shoots the fire for effect, and then they displace. And then going into roving gun or roving mortar. So roving gun can conduct registration and fire missions from a number of supplementary positions, assist in concealing the platoon's primary position and confusing the enemy as to the number of mortar section or tubes employed. Platoon vacates these supplementary firing positions upon completion of a specific mission. So this kind of ties back into offset registration. So you'd have a roving gun or squad that can go out, basically use, they can use be able to shoot adjusting rounds or even just use deceptive fires to kind of throw off enemy counter radar. So if counter radar picked up our mortars, they'd be picking up that one squad, which would be fast enough to shoot and then displace without giving up the whole platoon's primary position. And then going on to reduce the number of adjusting rounds. Platoons can increase accuracy and reduce adjusting rounds in several ways. These include position location devices such as a GPS, registration, putting in metadata into our computers, hasty surveys from known points to eliminate map errors, and use of friendly artillery radar to accurately locate firing positions. And then some of these abilities to reduce the number of rounds just involves getting artillery to help us with metadata and being able to have them disseminate that information down to us. That's my end of my class today. Please review any material that you need to continue to look up, and also refer back to Tactical Employment of Mortars, Chapter 5. Next class will be going over battle drills.